Good day, everybody. Welcome to my webinar presentation. My name's Shahid Solomon. I'm a city planner by training with a strong passion for environmental management and for climate change adaptation. I am employed by the City Finance Facility, the C40 City Finance Facility. I'm based in Durban, South Africa, and I'm currently working with assisting the City of Durban to come up with a transformative river management strategy. Now, a transformative river management strategy is essentially falling within what are being called nature-based solutions. How do we adapt cities to the huge challenges that they're facing using nature-based solutions? And much of what I'm going to be sharing with you is based on a recent paper that I presented together with my Durban counterparts to the U20 cities. So here's a quote. Nature-based adaptation planning is a challenging endeavor, not least because it requires transdisciplinary approaches to unite different actors' efforts and capacities. And here's the bottom line. Empirical knowledge on associated governance processes is scarce and fragmented. So my objective today is to begin to kind of unpack what we have learned in the context of the Durban project that may be of some use in understanding how other kinds of nature-based solutions can be implemented. So the context of Durban is, as with all South African cities, that of high levels of social vulnerability. In the particular case of Durban, the coastal areas have historically been occupied by higher income populations, with the foothills and the higher lying areas, some very, very well-known settlements like Ink and Umlazi. The unemployment rate in Durban is from 30 to 38% for youth. 18% of the population have no income, and we have one of the world's highest Gini coefficients in terms of inequality. And this is then reflected in the politics of marginalization and a very, very high level of vulnerability in the population, even as the city is now facing the massive challenges of the climate emergency. Studies have estimated that the value of environmental goods and services provided per annum in Durban is in the order of 6 billion rand per annum. I think this is actually quite a big underestimate. And you can see from this map, shows the areas that have been mapped for the Durban Metropolitan Open Space System, that a major part of the footprint of the city is actually natural areas. And in addition to that, Durban is in fact a biodiversity hotspot. Now, all of that life and all of that connectivity is reflected in the river system. And I'd like to talk just a little bit about what we call the Ettaquiny River Challenge. And kind of to start this, we need to think 200 years ago, when King Shaka was establishing the Zulu nation, not far from the modern city of Ettaquiny. The naming of the settlement is indeed Ettaquiny, which means place of the estuary or bay. And effectively the estuary was where the Ecological, which means gateway river, entered the sea. And this established the core structure, function, and sense of place of this beautiful city. And the names of the rivers that were named by King Shaka 2 centuries ago, like the Manzimtoti, Umlazi, Umgeni, Umkamaz, these names have now become inherent in the structuring, the functioning, and sense of place of the city. Indeed, life in the city is profoundly structured by the riverine system. But after industrialization, water management as with all other South African cities, followed the take, make, and dispose principle of linear economy: rainwater in, stormwater, river water, irrigation, drinking water, sewage, back into the sea. But that came with some obvious challenges. So the line of sewers follows the line of the rivers. So every time there would be a fault in the sewer system, immediately would get immediate instant discharge into the river, sometimes taking months to fix. So that a significant percentage of the base flow in many of Durban's and rivers today is indeed sewage. At the same time, settlement followed the pattern of the valleys, providing luxury and amenity for some, but hazard and danger for others. Some of the most notorious floods have happened over the last 3 or 4 years, with the May 2016 flood being quite devastating in its impact, followed again last year in May, where almost a third of this settlement was washed away, ultimately into the Indian Ocean, and severe damage took place to property, but there were also something like 60 lives lost within the province. This has a problem in terms of the economic impacts as well, with this very well-known hotel launching legal proceedings against the city. And flooding really is just one part of a frightening picture. In addition to high levels of flood vulnerability, water quality in almost all of the rivers is severely degraded, and in many cases, the E. coli at other levels are so high they can't even be measured. And of course, the waste and the pollution then end up in the estuaries and on the beaches, providing all kinds of hazards to the city's tourism economy, which is the driving force of employment within the city. Now, climate change aggravates all of this considerably. Hotter temperatures, and we'll be looking at urban temperatures of 4, 5, 6 degrees hotter, means hotter water, means more and new waterborne diseases and intensified vectors, the rats, the snakes, and the other kinds of not so pleasant bugs which are attracted to water and specifically to hot water, combined with more rainfall and more intense rainfall, meaning more flooding. And with climate change also comes more droughts. And the province itself faces the immense challenge of, when there are droughts, rural livelihoods are challenged, folk move to urban areas, the seemingly promised new land of the urban areas often a floodplain, and the very families who were subjected to the drought then become subjected to the flood. And it's this flood-drought cycle that is particularly devastating for marginal communities. This, of course, is a very systemic thing, and this is a lovely map, a lovely framework developed by Jane Turpey, and everything is interconnected with each other. And to just follow some of the logic, hard surfaces, increased wastewater, flooding, loss of property value, reduced GDP in output. This is a complex system that is failing. To remedy a complex system requires a systems approach. Now, nature-based solutions naturally present themselves as a way in which we could kind of use ecological infrastructure and community-based adaptation, as ways in which Durban could make this profound transition from a degraded river system to a secure, safe, and clean river system. But there are serious capacity constraints. And some of these capacity constraints are a low level of awareness of what ecological infrastructure is and what it can do and how much it costs, a low level of awareness of what options there are for community-based delivery of ecosystem services and ecological infrastructure. Skills are heavily biased to grey infrastructure design, construction, and maintenance. No department in Durban has a mandate to undertake integrated riverine management or develop ecological infrastructure. And the municipality, like most municipalities, has weak transversal capability. It struggles to work across departments. So you find that in this city, as with many others, there's much talk, there's much theory, but there's very little action. This is compounded with financial constraints. There's heavy pressure on budgets anyway to meet backlogs using grey solutions. Ecological infrastructure, unfortunately, is not considered a capital asset in accounting systems, so it cannot be funded from capital budgets. This also means that maintenance funding is not available, whereas extraordinary needs are now emerging from the devastating impacts of climate change. We've tried to address some of these two issues in the TRMP business case project. Just to remind you again what TRMP stands for, Transformative River Management Project. Now, the approach of the C40 City Finance Facility that I work for is to go so much further than simply linking cities with climate funding. So we are actually developing the TRMP business case for bankability for the city. We're working on facilitating the required finance and funding partnership. We're building capacity within the city to take the next steps, and we're sharing knowledge and building partnerships. These are the pillars of the C40 Finance Facility, and we're about to enter into a third phase of expansion from the 17 projects across the world that we're currently managing to a next stage of expansion. So upscaling river management requires that we take into account the pieces of the puzzle: governance, structuring, programming, coordination, champions and partners, financing and resourcing, both financial and human, service delivery models, and reporting, monitoring, and learning. We're very fortunate in Durban to have many years of matured projects. So the Sihlanzimvelo project, which I'll tell you a little bit more about now, led by the city, has been running for 7 years. The Alla River has quite a few years behind it as well. And the Durban Green Corridor Special Purpose Vehicle has also been running for 7 years. In addition to this are numerous other projects. So our challenge now in looking at a river management program for the whole city has been how to draw on all of these case studies and examples from a perspective of being able to upscale them. The Sihlanzimvelo project is really interesting. The governance is embedded in municipal line functions. It's a municipal line item. It's actually on the city's operating budget. And from the Roads and Stormwater Maintenance Department, consultants are appointed who in turn work with a network of community co-ops. The community co-ops then actually deliver the river services. They remove waste and invasive alien plants to clear up these very, very valuable upper catchment streams to bring benefits to both stormwater and infrastructure. There's a very technological monitoring system in place. And the project now is very much at the point where it's sustainable and replicable and is to be upscaled from 400 kilometers at present to 2,000 kilometers. We're very excited that as a result of the work of the CFF within Durban over the last 2 years, the city has already agreed to increase that 400 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers. But cost-benefit analysis is required to convince the city fathers and mothers that indeed this is money well spent and that is one of the things that we're currently developing for the city. So this is the business case vision that's been agreed to by a special business case subcommittee that was established by the city. And the vision is to build a compelling business case based on cost-benefit analysis for transforming some 7,400 kilometers of riverine corridors. That's an incredible length. We're looking at a distance of the length of the Nile River or the distance between London and New York. So the business case is to transform these riverine corridors to be resilient to climate change, to be valuable places which are clean, safe, healthy, useful, and pleasant open spaces, to close the loops with recycling, to create jobs and build a green economy, to build communities, to work in partnership with all affected stakeholders, and to impact positively on the city as a whole. So, how are we dealing with capacity constraints? Well, as part of our approach as the C40 City Finance Facility, we started with a comprehensive assessment of capacity needs within the city and produced a capacity development plan. That revealed critical deficiencies within the city. There was a lack of understanding of the climate emergency generally, and there was a lack of understanding of how that applied to different departments, and individuals felt themselves also not capacitated in terms of understanding how to implement climate emergency measures within their professions and disciplines. So we've developed a climate emergency masterclass, a 2-day primer that will help Durban officials to understand where they fit in, both departmentally and individually, into the climate emergency, and what types of programs and projects they can implement. We're working on supporting officials to be able to source funding. We are mentoring Durban officials in program management. And overall, looking back over the past 2 years, we've been excited to see the emergence of a new culture of working together. And one of the current projects that we're undertaking to build capacity is developing an ecological infrastructure toolkit that will not just describe different riverine ecological infrastructures, but will also look at what the operating costs are, the capital costs, and their maintenance needs. And some really interesting things have already emerged. And this is not actually happening in Durban, but this is happening in Msunduzi. The concept of floating wetlands, essentially retrofitting a wetland over already a highly disturbed riverine channel. A lovely project, 40 hectares restored at the River Horse Valley, next to the Umhlangane River, with many very, very interesting program of planting of riparian trees. And then, a somewhat famous frog, the Picker's Gill reed frog, some 50 of these frogs introduced to re-establish some of the ecological balances and systems removed. And of course, the big challenge with Durban is how does one actually manage the interface between stormwater and river water, with many different options being considered, but effectively developing different types of wetland interfaces between the stormwater system and the river water system is the most promising way in which one could eventually move toward a situation of having the kinds of clean, beautiful, safe, healthy water that the city could be proud of. So we're busy developing 4 business cases for the municipality. A business case looking at riverine management on public land, which is kind of easier because there the municipality owns the banks on both sides, but also looking at private land where the municipality doesn't own the land on either bank and all kinds of partnerships are necessary. And then also Ingonyama Trust land, where a big piece of the city, in fact, comes under traditional leadership and new approaches are required. So all of this is to be rolled up into an integrated business case, which we will have completed by the end of this year, and will then form the basis for raising many types of funding that are required. So how are we dealing with financial constraints? There's 4 types of funding needs that's required for the TRMP. The first is program management, program design, cost-benefit analysis, integration and coordination of many different functions, fundraising and research, river management partnerships and institution building, monitoring and evaluation, and possibly supporting up to 400 projects at any point in time. Now, in the world we all once lived in, there would be decades for Durban to evolve a river management program gradually over time. And probably Durban's incredibly fortunate to have been in the space of riverine management for the past 7 years. But the climate emergency is kind of like a freight train that's already impacting severely on the city. And, at best, the city has 10 years to put in place what ultimately is a massive program. And this requires program management. Funding is also required for riverine infrastructure, grey infrastructure, ecological infrastructure, and most importantly, recreational infrastructure, in order to empower communities to own riverine corridors. There's a need to make those spaces useful, places where activity happens. So all of these types of infrastructure are really important, including river management services. The main lesson that has come from the Sihlanzimvelo project is that riverine cleanups don't work. We need to design ongoing systems that maintain rivers on an ongoing basis and are able to access ongoing operational funding. And some of the things that happen within the scope of river management services include community-based stream cleaning, water quality monitoring, reporting faults in the sewage system, and of course, as ecological infrastructure is developed, it's high maintenance, there are opportunities for maintaining the ecological infrastructures that need to support sensible river management. In a developing context like Durban, socioeconomic capital is really, really important, and there's already fabulous projects that strongly aim to develop the relationship that communities have with their riverine spaces. And this includes leadership development, community education, enterprise development. By the middle of next year, Durban will have 100 small enterprises that are involved in the business of river management, but also green economy, including circular economy and recycling, with some really, really interesting projects dealing with the biomass and also the solid waste that's removed from rivers, and then the whole domain of leadership, skills development, and job placement. The risk that we face in designing sort of labor-intensive riverine management projects is that when people have worked a year or 2 or 3 on the project, they then find themselves with no real tangible marketable skills and no program to place those people in other kinds of jobs. And that is not the type of scenario one would like to see in future. We're also assisting the municipality to mobilize new sources of finance and funding, raising finance from within the municipality through what's called ring fencing or top slicing, from property owners through levies, fees and voluntary contributions, with business and also with global climate funds. Putting in place the right kinds of partnerships is critical to raising the funding. So at the city level, we're seeing the need to establish some kind of a coordinating and integrating and learning or sharing forum. But each catchment involves a whole lot of integration and management challenges. And it's envisaged that at least 12 catchment partnerships would eventually be required. and they in turn would then support river management precincts and river management and upgrading projects. Just to quickly touch on the finance and funding scenario, the estimated 10-year project need here is about 20 billion rand, most of which would be required for ongoing river maintenance. The bulk of the finance and funding will come from the municipality, property owners, and businesses in Durban, with us estimating that less than 20% will need to be financed externally by climate finance donors. Thank you very much.